Well, my first time with hearing about Jesus was probably when I was a baby, baptized. I was baptized on my sister's birthday. I just found out a couple of years ago. I just had never really registered the fact that I was baptized on her birthday. But yes, we went to church all my whole life from the time I was a baby. We had 9 kids in the family. We took up a whole entire row. So we had to get there early, so we got plenty of room to sit. And we all were very well behaved in church and didn't get to play and goof around because my dad was sitting right there. So, yeah.
I was baptized in the church. This was in the last century, actually. So and because my grandmother was an old German Lutheran, obviously you have to carry on with that. But the interesting thing was her husband was an Italian Catholic. So when she got him to convert, I think that set the stage for all the generations after that, that if you can get a German Lutheran to convert a Catholic, you're doing good. So
Did a good job.
Yeah, we've grown up in the church all along.
Confirmation was a really important time to me. We had changed churches, went to church across town, and so all the kids in my class were from the other side of town and different school, and so it was really interesting, and it was a really good learning process, and I truly enjoyed it. It was I was very spiritual during my teen years, and just really significant. It was a really good time for me.
My confirmation experience was growing up in St. Louis, which is the, let's see, can I say it?
The Mecca?
The Mecca of the Lutheran Church,
Yeah.
Missouri Synod, that we had the opportunity to have professors from the SEM to attend our church and whatever, so that even though I didn't go to our school that was sponsored by the church, we did do our Saturday morning things that lasted a couple of hours and whatever. And unlike today, ours was actually 2 full years that we went and whatever. So we had to, there was a lot of memory work and that sort of thing and whatever. And so I can remember that. And again, this is something that kids today don't do. Memory verses were learned drying dishes with mom. And so as you were drying the dishes, you had to recite your memory verses and whatever. And then the number of kids that we had in our class would have to actually stand up next to the desk and recite the Bible verse to the pastor, and he would correct you if you were wrong, and you'd have to do it again and whatever. And these were, there were a lot of lengthy passages and whatever. And so in going through the catechism, it was like you had to know it verbatim, backwards and forwards.
That's right.
So.
I remember that. We had a lot of memorization, and my pastor had called on me one time and asked me to recite all the books of the Bible backwards. So I did. He sort of threw them, because I didn't think I could do it either, but I did. But, it happens. When you learn on that stuff, you just learn it forwards and backwards.
So it sounds like
The importance of that time, I think, was really made more important to me as I went on in life, because at the time, everyone did the same thing. I mean, everybody at our church and all my brothers and sisters, and it was just what you did. That was part of life. There was no other thing. We said prayers before meals. We said prayers before bed. So Jesus was just a part of our lives. It wasn't something unusual, but it really did build a strong foundation for us.
Yeah, I think that the idea that you build from an early age, which gets to be into it's not necessarily a rote kind of procedural thing that you say, and we used to say before the meal prayer and then after the meal prayer, but we also did our bedtime prayers and whatever, but that was always, and Mom would sit down with us and we would read a chapter in the Bible and whatever. So it was like this became, for lack of a better word, a habit a positive habit, and so that you were familiar with not only the things that were going on in the Bible, but it set the tone for how you approached your belief system going throughout life. I know that other experiences that I've had, for example, going through completely through Boy Scouts, which is an extremely positive program and whatever, and doing those kinds of things where we learned the Scout oath and law, which included duty to God, and having the Scout law, and the last point of the Scout law being a Scout is reverent, and having to memorize those little ditties that went with that also over the course of years, and the raising of our children through the Scout program and through the church program has provided those positive impacts that are necessary. I continued with after I'd gone through high school, and back in the day we had a thing called Walther League, which was a youth program for kids in church in high school and whatever, and all the high school kids would get together and we would have little programs and things and whatever. And now
Make
they have
spaghetti.
Yeah, well, and then they would have, and later on when our kids came along, they did youth group and they did their plays and their programs and so forth. So again, it was a community based around activities that happened at church and so forth, along with the other activities that were outside the church that had positive, and I'll use the word character building kinds of activities. Later on, as life becomes more complex and you enter into adulthood and whatever, and having been in the Army and whatever, and even going through and having served in Vietnam and whatever, there were times and places where your reliance on your spiritual strength and understanding that you're not in this alone, that you can say, help me through this and have it right. And so even after all that, and again, going and getting, the older we get, the more we see that the broad evangelical Christian faith base that we have has gotten us through good times, tough times, hard times, scary times, and we're here again today, and testifying to the fact that when it's all said and done, it's His will that's going to be done, and we just pray that He's our Father and He's looking out for us.
We lived in a house where we had airplanes going over all the time in St. Louis, so.
So you okay, go ahead, Charlie.
So in our spiritual journey, our confirmation class that we had at my church was a full 2 years, and we went on Saturday mornings and whatever, because I didn't go to the school that was sponsored by the church, but we had, and because we were in St. Louis, which is the Mecca of the Missouri Synod Lutheran Church, we did have pastors from the SEM that would attend our church and whatever, and our confirmation classes included the memory verses, and we would have to do the memory verse where we'd actually have to stand up and recite them to the pastor and whatever, along with the Luther's small catechism and all the verses that were in there and everything, and what does this mean, and this is most certainly true, and going through all of those things. So it was quite a building process, and going from there, and along with other youth positive activities that we did, along with our school activities. We did Boy Scouts, and my sister did Girl Scouts, but we had the Cub Scouts and the Boy Scouts, and the duty to God, and the 12th point of the Scout law being a Scout is reverent. And actually, as an Eagle Scout, and both of my sons are Eagle Scouts, and so and my brother's an Eagle Scout, and his son is an Eagle Scout, and my sister has 2 sons that are Eagle Scouts. So, we do the positive things that involved church activities and the strength that we draw from them. So it's what we do. There, as we get older, all of us reflect back on things that have caused us to shake our fist at the Lord and say, "Why are you doing this to me?" And yes, I've had any number of those, and Peggy can attest to this, that I have been married before, and my first wife decided that she didn't want to be married anymore and whatever, and being brought up in a church where divorce was a taboo kind of thing and whatever, that was among the issues that I had. God, why are you letting this happen to me? Why is this happening to me? And I, to this day, although I'm on more or less friendly terms with my ex-wife because she is the mother of my oldest son, I don't know that either one of us can tell you why we got divorced. There was any indicators, and Peggy, I think, will attest to the fact that it took, even after we met, some years after I had gotten divorced, that it took me a while to open up and become completely and totally
Trusting
with what our family was. So it's like, yes, I've had my issues with where I think the Lord is placing me and where He's wanting me to go and what He wants me to see. But I do know that when He closes one door, He will open another door, or show you where the window is, and we just keep going from there, because if He brings me to it, He's going to get me through it, and that's I firmly believe that.
There was a time in my life that I think one of the difficult times in people growing up is once you're out of the house, you go to college, and then all these things go on, and there's a lot of temptations, there's a lot of crazy stuff that can happen. You get influenced one way or the other, but part of my issue at that time in my life, during my 20s, I guess, was that my parents both passed away really close together, and it was a tough time. I was really angry. I didn't understand it. All of us were very upset because, my youngest sister was 21 and she was still working on college, and it was a really hard time, and I really got lost along the way somewhere, and I just didn't have any focus. I didn't have a central faith anymore left. My trust was not there, and I just felt kind of, battered around. I just kind of went from one thing to another, and I think what really affected me greatly was meeting Charlie and his parents, and I started going back to church with them, and we ended up, getting married, and we, continued going to church, and it was really nice. It was really interesting that, he was Lutheran, so was I. I knew all the songs, knew all the words. It was really easy, and so. But I really felt that God got me through that time. It was very, very, very difficult. My siblings, we all had a really difficult time with that, and I think those of us that were still single during that period of time when my mom was so sick with cancer and my dad was not doing well, and I think there was a little bit of, some of my siblings have still really not found their way back to where they need to be again, and we were raised in such a strong household. My parents were very strong in their faith, and so it was kind of a difficult time, and I try and encourage them to, go back to that, but, people get lost, and sometimes they don't get found in this lifetime. They may, someday at this point in their lives, I don't know. It's really hard, but I'm just so grateful that I had a family situation that kind of led me back to where I needed to be with my family, and then we were able to raise our kids and get back to where we should be with my faith, and I was able to be there for Charlie and all his difficulties, because it was a difficult time. Being newly married, we had Phil right away, and then with the stepson, and I mean everything was just a lot. So we really needed to be, with God and having Him on our side and working together in our faith to get through some of those tough times. I felt that his parents just gave me another opportunity for parents. I mean, his mother and I were really good friends. I really, really appreciated his dad. I mean, I really loved them. We took care of his mom for several years. She lived with us for 2 or 3 years as she aged, and we just took care of her. She was just a really wonderful woman, and I was so happy to have known them. I just, whether or not I met him was, so, but, but his parents, I was just so fortunate. I was very, very lucky. I mean, I just feel like that if you can love your in-laws, you can just love anybody, really. So it was awesome. It was a wonderful, wonderful time with them, and they were really good to our kids, and they were a really good influence on them. I know at the time my mother-in-law moved in with us, my daughter was still in high school, and she was like, oh, Mom, I mean, high school kids, grandma moving in, right? And she just learned to have such a good relationship with her. I mean, they just really, really had a good relationship. They look so much alike. It's unbelievable. I look at her pictures of when she was Michelle's age, and it's really amazing to me. And it was just a really good experience for all of us. And, Phil always did have a good relationship because he's such a loving man anyway. But, it was really good for all of us. It really tied everything together. For Chris, I mean, because he didn't live with us for most of the time, and so when he did come over for the weekends, it was always such a special time for all of us, and the kids just love him so much now. We have a great relationship with him and his wife and his son, and our kids all really have a good relationship together. But yes, it really stabilized me a lot, brought me back. And I was really glad that nothing terrible happened to me during those years. I felt like I was sort of tossed out on the ocean or something, and I guess God was always there. He always was through all my life. I mean, there are so many times I could just pinpoint times that He's been there and done something just at the right time that I was okay with it, And sometimes my kids have pointed out how He's there for them, or how much their faith has brought them through the difficult times in their lives. I mean, it's just been an awesome experience, and I can just tell the people who are going through those tough times in their 20s when they're not sure what they want to do and where they want to go and what they, God's with you. He will be there and take care of you. You just have to put yourself in the right places. Not in the places like, where we played shuffleboard. We met at a little tavern where we played shuffleboard. And
Tell everything you know.
I know, but He even comes to the shuffleboard table.
That's true.
And gets us together, when we're supposed to. So you just never know. You never know where He is and what He's doing, but He'll get you through it. And I'm trusting that He'll get us through everything else. And I felt so strongly about what God has done for us in our lives that, it was really tough when the kids went through college. I mean, that's always, everybody who has kids through college knows how hard that is. And then when they go off and get married, then you're just, they're never coming back again. They're never going to be kids, be babies again. And so now I feel that, we have a time now where we can spend the time to do things, return some of the service that we've been given.
When I was in the service, that was back in the days, thing called the draft. And so most of us didn't have a choice as to whether we could go or not. So I was drafted into the Army and whatever, and because I had earned my Eagle Scout rank and whatever, when I went into basic training, I was allowed to go to what they called a leadership orientation course, which meant that when I actually went through basic training, I could be a squad leader and whatever, and so that when I got out of basic training, I had an extra, I got promoted and got an extra stripe and whatever. And then with that, I was sent to Fort Sill, Oklahoma. I don't care what anybody says about Oklahoma, don't go there.
Just drive through.
Yeah.
Get you to Missouri.
I'm sorry. But I was in the artillery, so, and again, because of the way I was being promoted or whatever, I went through an NCO school, so I ended up getting promoted, and so I went over to, and when I went to Vietnam, I had 3 stripes and was a section chief when I was over there. When you ask about, did the Lord have an influence on what was happening in my life when I was in the service, this is a little anecdote. One of my best friends has a name very similar to mine, and his nickname is Chuck, and his last name is Sears. Now, his full name is Charles Philip Sears. My youngest son's name is Philip Charles Seris, okay? And anyway, so Chuck gave me, when I went into service, or when I was going to Vietnam, gave me a St. Christopher medal, which is the patron saint of travelers or something or whatever. And it was on a little chain. And so I wore that St. Christopher medal the entire time I was in Vietnam. The day that I got back from Vietnam, the finding on the medal broke and wore out. So I never had to wear it again, or I never had it fixed or anything else. The silver coating on it was completely worn off. It was down to being a piece of brass or whatever it was. But again, if you say in your just any kind of thinking that was some kind of sign, symbol, or whatever it was, I'm going to say in my case, I went over there as a Lutheran. I wore a Catholic medal, but I came back. It broke, and I didn't have to put that back on, and I have not missed it and whatever. But I felt that was a part, just a religious kind of thing, that a subtle reminder that God is with you. And it doesn't make any difference where it comes from. I'm reminded, and I've done this when I was more active in Scouts and whatever. I was often called upon to do, lead the Lutheran services at camporees and campouts and so forth. And one of the things that I always, one of the homilies that I would give would ask the question, do you pick up the pennies that you see in the parking lot or on the sidewalk? And if you don't, why don't you pick that up? In my way of thinking, that is a reminder from God, because on every one of our coins in our country, it says, "In God we trust." And so just like the widow's mite, and she searched all over for it to find it and whatever it is, there's a penny on the ground. It's a subtle reminder that no matter how little its intrinsic or extrinsic value, the intrinsic value of God is there because He's reminding you, in God you trust. Pick it up, put it in your pocket, and you find 100 of them, it's $1. You take that $1, you take a dime of it, you give it back to the church. And it's just a subtle kind of thing and whatever. So I never fail to pick up pennies in the parking lot or whatever. It's just one way that God reminds me, He's still there. Are you thinking about me? You are now, because you picked up the penny that has my name on it. So it's just, again, one of those little things, and I'm reminded of those subtle little things that God does. We know that He does the big miraculous things like thunderstorms and all these kinds of things and whatever. But I'm convinced that He also does the little things just to tweak you, just to remind you that I am here, and you have been reminded one more time, I'm here. And if you just have that thought again that, oh yeah, God was there, He reminded me one more time, He's there, it works for me.
Got you through Vietnam, I guess. Well, actually, I worked at universities all my life. I kind of started working there right from college, and so I stayed in the same business. I have kind of a knack for math, and just like my son, that's where he gets it from his mother, somewhat. So, anyway, I was in the business part of it, and it's been interesting because it's always been in the medical side. I worked at the medical school at Washington University, and so it's been interesting because I felt that it was a really worthwhile thing to do. It was Washington University is notoriously a Jewish kind of university, so there was always a lot of rules and all this stuff about certain things. You just had to be careful about what you did and where. But there was always the Christians that were throughout the whole university, of course, as always, and there were little Bible groups, and there were always somebody you could find. But I felt that it was a very worthwhile thing to be doing, and it got us through many, many times of difficulties. It really was tough to work during the summers, though, because Charlie was a teacher, so he got to be off during the summer. But
Life choices.
I know. But it got our kids through the Lutheran schools because we couldn't have been able to do that. In fact, one of the things that really impacted me a lot was when Phil was getting ready to graduate 8th grade from one school, and he really desperately wanted to go to the Lutheran high school, which of course was quite a bit more expensive, and we were just agonizing over the decision because it was going to impact our household a lot. And so I went to work that day, and I got a promotion and a raise, which I wasn't even expecting, and it was just a gift. It was just a gift. It was really awesome. And so I was able to tell him, yes, he could go, and so he was very happy. He really, truly enjoyed that experience a lot. Played all the sports he could possibly play, and still got hurt a couple times, but he, it really, really helped a lot. Plus, this is an aside, but WashU also has a benefit for its employees that they pay the tuition for the children of the employees. So the kids got to go to Concordia University in Chicago, which is a Lutheran university, basically tuition paid. So I got them through their college education, and I mean, it has paid so much, paid back so much.
Were y'all consciously?
Each time something like a promotion, just in time for going to high school and different things like that, every time that happened, we all discussed the fact that it was a gift from God that we were able to do that.
All of the things, even as a public school teacher, and the school that I taught at was basically across the street from our house, we discussed as a family, because of what our faith was, that going back to elementary school, this might be the time that our son and our daughter need to go to Christian school. And now and we had to go through who's going to pick up the kids, who's going to take the kids, and it's on the way to work, on the way home from work, how are we going to do this? And so even going to elementary school, we sent them to the Lutheran elementary school, but again, that was a conscious choice that we made, and it was based on the realization of, okay, we know what we expect our kids to learn and achieve in school, and this is a better way to do it. And if we can afford and put forth the resources in elementary school and junior high and high school, that will better equip them to go to college and whatever. And so, and that was, the amount of money that we were making, even as a two-income family, was just barely enough to send them to the school and whatever. but it was a conscious decision that we made, and it was based on, we knew that they would be getting the things that they were not going to be getting in public school. And that was, the obviously the outstanding education, but the Christ-centered education that we thought they needed and whatever, because we were involved with the church a little bit anyway, but they needed to have this reinforcing from other people and from people that they needed to be peers with and whatever, because as they would be growing up and growing older, they needed to have a circle of friends that would be lifelong Christian friends as opposed to not so much so. And here we are years and years later, and I can honestly say that our kids are still friends with kids that they met in elementary school and in junior high school and in high school and in college, and they all, if you read, their Facebook posts to one another, they are still profoundly supportive of one another, no matter what their role or lot in life is. They are holding them up and wishing them well and good cheer and support in everything that they're doing and whatever. And I can't imagine not having had, if they hadn't had that benefit of that Christian education. I just can't imagine that. I can't imagine their
It
what
was.
they would have been.
It really was. I mean, we have been so blessed in our lives, all of us. And it's
Yeah.
been great. And the kids really have appreciated everything that comes along. I mean, even now they, realize some of their friends are still paying off student loans and everything else. And they just are able to get by without, they've already taken care of a lot of that stuff. And so, it's just, financially, it's one kind of thing, but the other part of it is just what they have ended up being, because they're teachers in parochial schools, and that's a choice for them. They could do a lot more. I mean, I kept saying, don't you want to be a doctor? Don't you want to be a nurse? But they never wanted to.
Well,
they really wanted to teach and work with kids and
That's
do
very
the
true.
things that they're doing,
Very
and
true. And even
they're very good at it, so.
And even
It's our gift.
our oldest son, Chris, who is he works at the University of Missouri, but he is also a godly man, and he and his wife are very grounded and participatory in their church up there, and it's like, okay, and
He was fortunate that
yeah, well,
he grew up in a small town, and he went to high school at a school that was a whole bunch of little small towns came together, and it just was awesome. They had great, just really good experience there.
Yeah.
It was really a good
Yeah.
experience for
but it's
him.
like,
and
I'm happy to say that my sons are godly men. Their wives are godly women, and this is, and my son-in-law is a godly man. Wow. Speaking of our son-in-law, I must share this. The church that Peggy and I were married in was also the church where his mom and dad got married.
he recognized her from our wedding
And it's
pictures.
like,
So they got
okay,
married
so God created
So
this
funny.
universe, vast as it is, but when you get down to it, okay, we have a family that's in like
Yes, it's such
three
a small.
churches here, whatever. It's like, okay, so you.
Well, it was
you
interesting
sort
because
us
Michelle
out and
met
put us
him
all
at
together.
Concordia.
Yeah.
And he was from St. Louis. So, I mean,
So, yeah,
it just was interesting that it ended up like that.
It is so great.
Kind of, I feel that the important thing is that the children always remember that their family loves them, and that's where they need to be God-centered in, and always remember that they can go back to or go forward to, a family and loving relationships and taking care of each other, even if it's just a church family or your friends or just, whoever it may be. Just don't forget that God is there with you in all of your relationships, that you need to look for that and not feel that you're lost, even when you're by yourself. Go find a friend, find someone. There are churches everywhere. Just go there and become a part of that family, and whatever it takes to find that spark that it takes to remember whose child you are, and who's taking care of you, and who is always on your side, and where your strength lies. Because I think that's the important thing that everyone forgets all the time, a lot of times. I know I have. And I still do. I mean, no matter what happens, there's still days that I wake up and think, why am I feeling so terrible, or whatever. You just feel bad, or just don't feel like, just don't feel right. Just, remember that God's always there, and He'll get you through, and find a positive thing to do, and that'll get you there.